This is a Zach Feldman Show replay on ZRadioLive.com.
The Web C Music Station, Z Radio Live. This is the Zach Feldman Show. Joining me over the phone is an artist. His name is Kevin McGeary. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me here on the Zach Feldman Show. How's everything going?
Great. Thanks for having me, Zach.
Anytime. So tell me about your style of music. You know, you've came out with a bunch of great ballads as of recent, and also some great music videos too. But tell me all about, you know, you as an artist. You know, what can people expect when they're listening to you?
Well, I wear a lot of different hats creatively. Suppose I'm best known for performing here in Manchester, England as The Kev, which is a kind of just a mixture of, it mixes bottomless cynicism with life-affirming silliness.
That's the best way to live.
So, yeah. So I guess they have their roots in being Python-esque. But they've gone in their own direction over the years. And I also write and record songs in Mandarin Chinese, which I'm, because I used to live in China. But these days I'm focusing on performing as The Kev.
You know, tell me a little about, you know, performing in a different language. Obviously, that must be super difficult to, you know, to perfect. But, you know, obviously you've had, you know, time to learn the language itself. But is that something that comes naturally to you, or is that, you know, still a challenge to these days?
It only comes naturally in the sense that being weird comes naturally to me. So it was the Chinese thing started out as just a study method that got out of hand because I was living in a small town in China and there wasn't much entertainment and there was no smartphones in those days. So I would go to karaoke almost every evening, and I ended up writing my own songs, and it just moved from there. I was writing Chinese songs before I was writing English songs with any confidence or self-belief, because when it came to writing English songs, I was much more familiar with the canon and whose footsteps I was following in, whereas with the Chinese songs I was generally pretty ignorant, which was a strength masquerading as a weakness.
Well, you know, now you're more focused on creating, you know, English music and actually more guitar covers in a sense. You know, tell me a little about, you know, you and the guitar. You know, is that kind of your instrument of choice where you always go for whenever you're creating a song?
Definitely, because it's I got my first guitar when I was 13, and I haven't spent that much time in Spain, but I've often been immersed in Hispanic culture, and even Spanish composers like Isaac Albéniz and Enrique Granados, who both lived in the early 20th century, that they played and composed for the piano, but their music transposes perfectly for the guitar, even though they didn't even play the guitar, because Spanish composers just have the guitar sort of hardwired into their brains, and there's no getting away with it. And I work in a similar way with the guitar. So the songwriting process always involves an acoustic guitar. There's no getting away from it for me.
Yeah, you know, and you call it kind of like the classical guitar on YouTube, you know, which I think is hysterical. And you know, and not only that, you have such a great talent when it comes to that, you know, performing kind of like as this one piece band. Do you like kind of being your one orchestra kind of deal, or, you know, are you kind of looking for all those members to kind of be a part of it too?
I much prefer it to the alternative, because musicians, well, creative people in general, tend to be disorganized and tardy. So the fewer people you involve, the fewer headaches there are. So I generally prefer to do things alone.
Musically. You know, when you kind of decided, you know, this is what I wanted to do in life, you know, create music and create, you know, a kind of like a fun atmosphere for people listening to the music. You know, did you always kind of see yourself as the wacky and wild creator of music?
No, not at all. Because I've known many good comedians, and I've known, like everybody, I meet plenty of self-proclaimed funny people, and when it comes to being funny, I'd say there's not really any such thing as talent. It's a craft, and you have to spend years at it. So, yeah. I never particularly wanted to be wacky. I just, as I got older, I realized being wacky was my best option. It was because it was the best way of just using all of my strengths at the same time and getting noticed.
You know, one of the songs you created called "Wiggle Your Hips" too, and you know, by The Kev. I mean, that just shows your example of wacky and wildness too, you know, when it comes to creating music, and kind of meshing the, you know, the comedy aspect of music together, to create something so much fun. Tell us a little about Wiggle Your Hips.
Well, the problem with satire is that it ages pretty quickly. But so I wrote that song as a satire to WAP, which came out the previous year by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. But I think that particular bit of satire it won't age for many years to come, because pop music videos are just getting even racier and racier every year. Because in the past couple of weeks, there's been the Sam Smith. I don't want to call it a scandal, a controversy involving the singer Sam Smith. But it's just it goes all the way back to the Beatles in the 1960s. People thought the Beatles' hairstyles were leading the country down a moral sewer. So it's just same thing, different generation. So yeah, Wiggle Your Hips. It's just something I observed about pop music, in that historically pop music has been aimed at teenage girls. They're the target market for most boy bands. But nowadays, most music videos seem to have the target audience of dirty old men, which is a good marketing strategy. Because
I mean, sometimes it might be a good marketing strategy for sure. I think depends on how you look at it. I think.
Well, it's like because the baby boomers started to be born in 1945. So over the past 15 years or so, the baby boomers have been reaching retirement age. So the elder population is larger than it's ever been. So it does make sense.
We're talking with Kevin McGeary, and about his act called The Kev. You know, tell us about kind of what your plans are for the future. You know, what are you going to be doing next with The Kev?
Well, I've always thought that turning a passion project into a professional venture kind of it kills the passion. So I'm not seriously trying to monetize my stuff, but I'm just trying to keep going with it, but be even more me. So even Kevier. So just be even more unapologetic and uncompromisingly silly and cynical.
Even Kevier is the best way of being Kevy, I think.
Exactly.
Yes.
When you keep being me, so my only ambition with it is to keep being me, but even more so.
I love it. I love it. So tell me about, you know, when you're creating music, you know, where do you start?
Where do I start? Well, it depends on this type of music. So the Chinese songs, I'd say I'd probably get most of my inspiration from existing Chinese songs, because when teaching myself the language, I learned a lot of Chinese pop songs, and they formed the basis. Also Chinese literature, because I teach Mandarin, and you just encounter really nice phrases and beautiful, just nice lines or great quotes that you can build something from. Also, when I live there, it's a very musical language, and you almost have to sing it to be understood. And you just overhearing people talk on the phone, you get inspiration. When it comes to English songs, probably. I find reading poetry from the past century is really good for getting lines that form the seed of an idea. For example, I have The Kev song that the premise is very heavily based on a poem by Dennis O'Driscoll called Someone. And it's the Kev song is called Someone Somewhere, which I wrote at the start of 2021. It's a mixture of that poem and The Bad Touch by You and Me, Baby Ain't Nothing But Mammals. Is it by the Bloodhound Gang?
Yes, I know that song. Gang. Yeah.
So there's that, but definitely an indispensable resource when it comes to getting inspiration for the Kev songs is The Onion and the Daily Mash. The founding editor of The Onion, Scott Dickers, he now teaches a comedy course online.
And, that's fantastic. I didn't know that.
I mean, he's sometimes, he's a bit too American for my taste, in the sense that his definition of success is breaking Hollywood and appearing on Saturday Night Live and that kind of thing. My definition of success is much, much more modest than that.
I would say America is really where the comedy kind of started from, in a sense. Obviously, unless you want to talk about Jimmy Carr, who I think is a fantastic British comedian, but a lot of your good material probably comes from the States, in a sense.
Well, I'm not averse to being successful, but I would never want to be on the sofa with James Corden or whatever because it's just not me.
Fair enough. Something on your website too. You play Spanish guitar. How is that different? I guess from playing regular guitar. I mean, obviously there's a
Um,
different style to it, but
uh,
you know,
yeah, it's really my first love. So I got my first guitar when I was 13, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but my first guitar hero was Noel Gallagher of Oasis. My misspent youth. But then as I got to, when you're still a teenager and you're just finding yourself, I realized that being in bands was a fast track to an early grave because it means relying on musicians. So by the end of my teens, I was pretty much solely as a classical guitarist. So I had a collection of electric guitars which were gathering dust by the time I was 20, because I just decided to go through the grades as a classical guitarist and got qualified to teach the classical guitar when I was 20. It's a very quiet instrument. Um, it's a bit, the classical guitar is a bit similar to the saxophone in the sense that it's either a solo instrument, or if you're going to have it in a song, it has to be the absolute center of attention or nowhere or not in it at all. Um,
hmm.
like for example, a famous song that involves a saxophone is Baker Street, or there's even a couple of Springsteen songs that have a saxophone solo. Um, and so it's the classical guitar is kind of a quietly arrogant instrument in
Hmm.
that it doesn't draw that much attention to itself, but when it's there, it needs to be the center of attention.
That's fair. And you also have training courses and tutoring courses online. You mentioned a little bit about how you are yourself a Mandarin tutor, but also
Yeah.
you can teach guitar too to those who want to learn from it from
Um,
you.
well, I'd love to just have a normal 9 to 5 job in an office, but my resume is completely insane, so it's not always easy to sell myself to
Listen,
employers.
I wouldn't even want a 9 to 5 job. I'm with you on that. I think it's
Well,
boring. It's nuance.
to be creative, you need structure and discipline. So, because the most creative people, I think, are pretty in their day-to-day lives. They are pretty sensible. They they sleep they have regular patterns of sleep and meals and bathing, and that provides the basis to be creative. So there's definitely the 9 to 5 world. There's definitely a lot to be said for it, but I'm not in it at this point in time.
But you do have those options though for those who want to get the experience from you. Who want to get the knowledge that you so possess about not only learning Mandarin but the guitar, creative writing, essay writing. Where did you went to school? Obviously, where was your degree from?
So my bachelor's degree. So bachelor's degrees are just 3 years here, and master's degrees are usually just 1 year. So my bachelor's degree was in film and literature, but it's not like the US system where you have a major and you study a bunch of other subjects in the first year or so. So I did film and literature as my bachelor degree, but by the end I skewed almost entirely toward literature, and then my master's degree, which I did in the academic year 2005-2006, was in creative writing.
Are you
So
ever going to write a book at all, or like any type of creative
um,
writing in the future?
yes, so well, my master's thesis was a novella, um, which but it was all very too much too young. I was only 22 when I finished it, so I might go back to it in many years from now.
I think
But
I think revamping that. I think that'd be an amazing book.
yeah,
Yes.
it's probably best left gathering dust. And but I did complete in the first half of my 30s, so from 2014 to 2018, I worked a lot on a book of short stories, and uh, they were all individually published, and then I self-published them as a collection in 2021, just to finally draw an end to a 7 year project, which and it took me. I gave it my absolute everything, and it's a very very thin book, but it's hard work writing fiction,
Yeah.
prose fiction.
Oh, I bet. No, I listen. That's why I'm not a writer. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm also on the radio. I stay away from the book area aspect of things. But aside from that, the Kev, I'm so excited for people to take a listen to your music too, and find out everything about you. But for those who want to find your music and keep in touch with you, where can they go?
And the best place is at kevinmcgeary.com. So there's no no www. It's just a WordPress powered website of mine. I'm also on Instagram as thekev84. I think if I ever did become famous, I would delete my Twitter because you know you just anything you say on Twitter can get you into serious trouble.
No,
So,
see, I would do the opposite. I would delete my Facebook because Facebook just sucks.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Just get rid of it all. Honestly, how about that?
and one of your so-called friends would end up selling info about you to the papers probably. So,
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, they need the money. But you know what? I'll just say to them, like, you know what? If you want to and you can get some good money out of it, then why not? You know, go ahead.
exactly.
Kevin McGeary, seriously, thank you so much for joining me here on the Zach Feldman Show. Best of luck with everything. Again, you can go find his music as The Kev by going to Kevin McGeary. Going to kevinmcgeary.com. Kevin McGeary, thanks so much for joining me here on the Zach Feldman Show, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks for having me, Zach.
Want to hear more? Listen to the Zach Feldman Show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ZRadioLive.com.